This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law. And this is podcast 43 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. With me today, delighted to be joined by Usman Mahmood, aka HF. HF, welcome back, my man.
Thanks, man. I told you I'd be back, and I'm here to stay this time.
Well, that's why we didn't call it a comeback. You've been here for years, right?
I have been here for years, and I'm ready to make another splash on the scene.
HF, bubbly as always. Before we get started, just a quick few reminders to the people out there. If they want to check out more exciting Lights Out boxing content, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. And if you want to know more about Lights Out, don't forget to check out our social media platforms. The links are below in the description. We've got a lot to talk about on today's show. And if anybody wants to listen to this in the audio platforms, links are going to be below in the description. But as I mentioned, HF, we've got a lot to talk about. And we have to start off with what went down last night in the 147 welterweight division. A fantastic fight between Terence Bud Crawford and Showtime Shawn Porter. It was a brilliant fight, but in the end, and still, Crawford retained his world title last night with a victory over Shawn Porter. Before we get into what's next for both fighters and the nitty-gritty, we have to talk about the fight itself. A lot of people had it down for a potential fight of the year candidate. Do you think it lived up to the expectation?
Well, it won't be fight of the year because I think that has already been set by Fury and Wilder 3. But it definitely did live up to his billing because Shawn Porter always comes to fight and all of his fights are always explosive. And I knew with Bud's counter-punching style that it will gel well, and I'm glad I did stay up for the fight because I was mesmerised by the performance.
You were supposed to ring me as well before the fight started. I got up before you.
Yeah, I did, but I was so excited about the fight that I kind of forgot. But I will make up for it next time.
I hope you do, HF. But nonetheless, it was a very, very good fight. You know, the skills of Terence Crawford and the relentless come forward stance by Shawn Porter. It was a tremendous fight. Obviously, the fight ended by Terence Crawford winning in round 10. Porter's old man, Kenny Porter, throwing in the towel after Porter was dropped twice in the 10th round. But, you know, prior to the ending of the fight, what was your scorecards leading up to that 10th round?
I had Crawford slightly up by 1 or 2 rounds, but not much. It was close going into the last few rounds. And obviously once Crawford got the 2 knockdowns in, it kind of became a case of Porter having to then stop Crawford. Obviously his father didn't allow that to happen, but we all knew what was coming next.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you on that. And listen, before obviously round 10, I actually had Porter ahead. Everyone was entitled to their own opinion. I thought Porter was the more busier fighter. I thought he was the more successful fighter. But Crawford, nonetheless, until that round 10, he was very much in the fight. A lot of people had it pretty much even. I had Porter ahead by a couple of rounds. But as we've said about Crawford, the one thing about him, he is one of the best finishers in the game. And you could kind of sense that Kenny Porter knew what was coming. And you mentioned before the podcast that Kenny Porter only did that because it was Porter's last fight and he didn't want to see his son go out. But we have this in the past where fighters want to go out on their own shield. You know, Deontay Wilder in the second fight with Tyson Fury was very critical of Mark Breland and got rid of him because he said that he didn't want his trainer to stop the fight. He wanted to go out on his own shield, kind of like how he did in the third fight. But do you think in the end, the right decision was made?
I think it was more to do with the fact that it's his father managing him. He didn't want to see his son get hurt. As we know and seen before in the past, that Crawford is an awesome finisher, as he done against Jose Benavidez, Amir Khan and Kell Brook. I wouldn't want to see my son at the mercy of Crawford, so I probably would have done the same thing, given the fact that it did become a 10-7 round, and Porter was not looking like he's going to stop Crawford. He was behind on the scorecards, so I think it was a case of quitting whilst, or not quitting, but it's choosing the safety first approach, letting Porter go out with his senses intact and with his respect intact. Crawford's a great fighter, so there's no shame in losing to him anyway. But since then, obviously, Porter's announced his retirement, so he had that at the back of his mind anyway. But yeah, tremendous career by Porter. He's fought everybody he had to face in the division. It's no shame. He won some of them, he lost some of them. He made a lot of money. He's got all his senses intact. He's still got a job with PBC commentating and in the studio. So good luck to him in the future.
Yeah, 100% a phenomenal fighter. You look back at some of the fights he's been in. I mean, you know, the fight with Errol Spence and now this fight, he genuinely has fought the best fighters at the 147 division. You know,
he fought Thurman, Spence, Berto, Broner. Fought Cotton. He fought Brooke. Yeah, he beat Danny Garcia. He beat Berto. He beat Broner. So he's had a good run.
100%, and he's a former two-time champion of the world. And listen, I think he bows out with the greatest respect. And I think, you know, hats off to him. And I think
the best thing you could do is that no one can ever say anything bad against Porter because he's a respectable guy in the ring and outside the ring. That's how you want to leave your legacy.
100%. Talk a bit about Crawford. You know, a lot of people were saying before the fight that Crawford hasn't really fought a come-forward fighter with that relentless engine that Porter possesses. And a lot of people were asking the question, how does Crawford deal with that at such, well, I wouldn't say the latest stages of his career, but at a certain age that he is at now? How do you think Crawford handled Porter's engine last night?
Well, I actually did predict that Crawford will stop Porter. And I predicted that based on the fact that Porter is a come-forward fighter and Crawford is a good counterpuncher with a lot of power and he's got a mean streak to him. So I knew that at one point or at some point Porter would walk into his punches, and it's exactly what happened. Porter went forward, Crawford stepped it back, come back with the uppercut, dropped him first time round, did it again second time round, until his father had seen enough.
Yeah, well, listen, this is why we say Crawford is one of the best out there. I mean, you have a look at previous fights, such as the Kell Brook fight. I think it was round 3 or 4 that he stopped him in. Prior to the knockout, you know, Kell Brook was doing very well in the fight, and a lot of people had him winning those few rounds that they did fight. But I think in the end, when you look at Crawford, he's a tactician. He figures people out. It kind of reminds me a bit of Canelo. You know, it takes him a few rounds to figure a fighter out. And that's what I really like about Crawford. Porter obviously retired after the fight. Crawford moves forward. We know that his time is up with top rank and Bob Arum. He is now a free agent. When you look at Terence Crawford and his resume and what he's achieved, does it baffle you that a fighter of this caliber is a free agent right now in boxing, especially when he's at the real prime stages of his career?
I think fighters are now starting to realise that the best route for them is to become free agents. They can negotiate and fight at any network. That's what Canelo's doing right now. Hopefully, Crawford. Well, he did say in the press conference afterwards that he's going to leave Bob Arum because he couldn't get him to Spence fight. So, hoping he goes and joins PBC and gets a Spence fight. And if they and when they fingers crossed do eventually fight, I am going to go for Crawford to win on points against Spence. I've said that since day one. I always favour the boxer over the brawler. Spence can box as well, but I just like Crawford a lot more.
Kind of like moved on to the next part of this topic, but we'll discuss what.
There's just so much to talk about with Crawford. I'm a big fan.
100%. You know, there's even a couple of people said last night that he should consider a move up to 154 as well, and even that's something he said he'd be open to. But we'll talk about what is next for Terence Crawford and the rest of the landscape of the 147 division. When you discuss the current pound for pound list right now, you've got great fighters in this such as Canelo and Inoue, you know, Usyk, Fury, you know, Josh Taylor. There's many great fighters that you speak about, but where do you rank Bud right now in that list?
Top 2, I would say he's second behind Canelo. Canelo's become undisputed at 168. His only loss was to Floyd Mayweather 8 years ago. It will take a lot to shift Canelo away from the top number 1 pound for pound. But Crawford is really, really up on his neck right now. And obviously, if he does defeat Spence, then I might just put him at the top.
Well, let's talk a bit about that potential fight with Errol Spence. That's the fight everybody wants to see. When we started off this year with our first podcast, we talked about 3 fights we'd like to see, and one of those was Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Errol Spence was at the fight last night, and you kind of seen his reaction when the fight was over. He just got up and left the building. I would have liked to have seen him climb in the ring and sort of, stir the pot a little bit, if you know what I mean. Obviously, that didn't happen. He was very critical of Shawn Porter's old man, but that's a fight that the world of boxing wants to see right now, because you can't really, look, everyone's got their opinion, but you can't, it's hard to say who really is the number one fighter at 147. And the only way to determine that is for these two to eventually get in the ring and have that fight that the world wants to see. We've got Spence right now with the PBC. We've got Crawford, who's a free agent. I actually think Crawford will sign with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. I can just see it happening, and I actually think it would benefit Terence Crawford if he goes with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. I just think the better the caliber of the fighter, the more Eddie Hearn manages to get out of. And with him coming into the late stages of his career, I'd like to see Crawford go with someone like an Eddie Hearn. I mean, I'm shocked that Bob Arum never renewed his contract and thought about the next step of his career. But listen, each to their own. The fight with Errol Spence is the fight I want. It's the fight that you want. It's the fight that everybody in boxing wants. Does it happen in 2022?
I think it does, but I don't think the best move is to go to Eddie Hearn, because Eddie Hearn doesn't control the welterweight scene. That is obviously controlled by Al Heyman, PBC. You got Spence, Porter, Danny Garcia, Ugas, all these guys fighting on PBC. So best move for Crawford would be to fight on PBC network.
So you can actually see Terence Crawford going over to the PBC just
on a fight-by-fight basis, yeah. I think what they need to do is, the only thing stopping the fight from happening is monetary split. I say put it down the middle. Crawford's got his credentials, so has Spence. Cut it down the middle, 50-50. Give us fans the fight that we want to see.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you've got two phenomenal fighters. Two of the very best fighters that the 147 division has probably ever seen, and it is a massive shame that fight hasn't happened. It is part of a number of fights that we want to see as boxing fans that is yet to happen. I'd like to believe that there's still a bit more time with both fighters, but listen, we've been talking about this fight since Spence beat Shawn Porter. That was all the way back in 2019. We're now moving into 2022, and the year is almost up. But listen, it's the inevitable. That's the fight that you want to see. Both undefeated fighters, and if you look at it, there's not much left in the 147 division. Yes, you've got your Dinas Ugas, and yes, you've got Conor Benn, who's a rising star. But I think if these two do fight, there's not much out there left in 147.
There's not. Danny Garcia's lost to Spence already. Lost to Porter. Keith Thurman. He's gone into hiding. He's lost to he lost to Pacquiao, didn't he? So he's tucked away right now. There's no one left. You got a few up and coming stars such as Jamal Herring, but they're not ready for the big time yet. Conor Benn, I wouldn't put him anywhere near to these guys right now. He's got too much to prove. Plus, no one outside of Britain knows him yet anyway. Let's leave him out on the side. Next fight has got to be Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. From there, the winner may move up. Although at 154, I don't know how strong that division is. I know you got one of the Charlos there who trains with Errol Spence, so I don't see them guys fighting. You got Jarrett Hurd, who has gone a bit quiet though. Mungir's moved up, so the only better fight that makes sense is for these guys to fight each other. You've got Josh Taylor, I think is a bit too small for these guys. He'll get stopped by either of them. He's got his eyes on Tiafimo, who's another division below that. So, like I said, there's no one else for them to fight.
It's exciting times for boxing. You've got a lot of potential matchmaking out there. Before we move on to the next topic, we have to obviously discuss Shawn Porter. What was your most fondest memory of his career?
I would say his fight against Keith Thurman was really good, really exciting. I think it was like fight of the year. He done the same thing against Errol Spence. I just remember him for his tenacity in the ring, his skill level. He's short and stocky, but people don't realise he's really quick on his feet. He's got sharp shooting jab. He's relentless. And he's a nice guy, and he's done a lot out of the sport, given a lot back to the sport, and he goes off into the sunset with his head held high, and there's no shame in losing to the fighters that he's lost to. Maybe could have beaten Brooke based on what Brook went on to achieve, which is not much more than beating Porter himself. So that's the only downside of his career, I would say. I think Porter is a better fighter than Brook, so maybe he should have won that fight.
I think for me the most, I mean, a lot of people might think, well, why would you choose that as his fondest moment of the career? But I loved the Errol Spence fight. I think that fight prior to the knockdown could have gone either way. I actually had it I actually had Porter up at that point before he got the knockdown. And once Spence got that knockdown, it just sort of, pushed him up into a further lead, obviously making it 10-8 round. But for me, that's one of my all-time favourite fights. It was a lot of questions asked of Errol Spence at the time, and of course, people were saying, has Shawn Porter still got it? Can he still hang with the big boys at 147 pounds? But I loved his fight with Errol Spence, and I think the performance he put on that night, nobody deserved to lose that fight. But obviously, Spence just done that a little bit more by scoring that knockdown. That's a fight that could have gone either way. But listen, a true boxing great, very, very privileged to have seen him throughout his peak careers, and he'll be missed by the boxing world. But listen, he's still got his Porterway podcast, and as you mentioned, he still plays a part in the PBC broadcasting side of things. So exciting times for the 147 division. But listen, we all want to see that huge fight between Porter and Crawford. Let's move on, because obviously there was a
Spence and Crawford.
Sorry, Spence and Crawford. Let's move on. Let's talk about another fight that happened on that night. The night before, between Demetrius Andrade and Jason Quigley. Demetrius Andrade retaining his world title by stopping Jason Quigley in round 2. It was pretty much inevitable what was going to happen in that fight. And that's no disrespect to Jason Quigley. Demetrius Andrade moves on. Is he going to get a big career-defining fight next? Who knows? But listen, he only got 2 rounds of it. But what did you make of it?
I think Andrade showed his class. Andrade knew he had to put in a big performance to try to entice Charlos into the fight. I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. I don't think anyone's queuing up to fight Andrade, because he's a high risk, low reward kind of fighter. It's a shame really, because he's been fighting for a long time, but he's not had that career defining fight yet. I'm not sure what he plans to do next. I don't really see too many guys queuing up to fight him, which is a shame. But this is what happens in boxing sometimes. He's in the bracket of who needs him.
We did an interview with Paulie Malignaggi during last week, and he said that 2 of the most criminal things in boxing is, one, Dillian Whyte's not got a shot at the WBC title or any part of the world heavyweight title, and he goes, the other one is that Demetrius Andrade, with the age that he is at, he has not had a career-defining fight. Now, listen, whether it's at 160 or 168, the career-defining fight was probably that fight with Billy Joe Saunders, which never went ahead in the end because of the whole nasal spray incident. But I spoke to Adam Smith as well last night at the Sky Sports Boxer show, and he said he's got a stance and he's got an approach that no fighter likes to go against.
And he's a southpaw as well, and he's got power when he wants to use it. He's got skills. He's a former Olympian.
But HF, would you not think that one of the big fighters out there, whether it's at 160 or 168, should look at that and think, well, he's got a style that nobody likes to go against. I can sort of do wonders for my career if I take him on and beat him.
Yeah, and he's got a world title as well.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm a big critic of the Charlo brothers. I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's Jamel Charlo who's in that division. Because for me, Jamel Charlo is in the same bracket. These Charlo brothers talk a big game. They always go up to the fights and try to cause a scene. But when it comes down to it, they have not fought anyone. The biggest win of Jamel Charlo's career has probably got to be Erickson Lubin. Lubin I did rate highly. But I don't know why Charlo's not fighting Andrade. They both need each other. It'll be the biggest win of their careers.
I have to say I was quite disappointed with the fact that Eddie Hearn never made Andrade versus Golovkin. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the fight between Murata and Golovkin, but I just thought at the time, because of obviously we lost some of the year due to the pandemic, and now we've got full crowds back in attendance. I liked the fight between Andrade and Golovkin, and I thought that would have been a fight that Eddie Hearn would have looked to have made. But what we've got now is obviously we've got Golovkin taking on Murata, and then we've got Andrade who's just won against Quigley, and then also we've got Eubank versus Williams. We've kind of got like a Robin round sort of thing going on, where the winner could potentially fight the winner. But is 2022 going to be the year where we can see an Andrade in with a Golovkin or a Eubank, or I don't know, maybe even a Billy Joe Saunders or one of the Charlos, because I look at Andrade right now. I've got certain opinions of Andrade. Do I think he's a good fighter? I think he's a decent fighter. I don't think he's on the level of Canelo. I don't think he's on the level of Golovkin, and I certainly think Billy Joe Saunders would have schooled him a few years ago, right? Demetrius Andrade comes out during the week and he questions Canelo's record. I'm not being funny or anything, right? But when you look at who Canelo's beaten, forget throughout his career, throughout the last year, and yes, we had this debate on our last podcast, who's Demetrius Andrade beaten? Who has he fought?
I think it's more down to frustration. He's frustrated that Canelo's getting all the plaudits, fighting winning an undisputed belt at a weak division.
You say it's a weak division, HF, but again, back to the point is he beat 3 undefeated world champions at the time within 11 months.
Yeah, but I don't rate the guys who he beat though. I don't rate them. I don't rate Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders because these guys had not beaten anyone prior to the fight, and same for Caleb Plant. Who was their biggest win? That's my problem with them. With that, that's basically what Andrade is trying to say as well. At the same time, Andrade is just frustrated. I disagree with you when you said that Billy Joe Saunders would school Andrade based on what Billy Joe Saunders hasn't. He hasn't fought anyone either.
But
there's a lot of
these
big fights are just not happening.
If you look at Billy Joe Saunders' record and you look at Andrade's record, I think Billy Joe Saunders has a better record.
I don't know. I don't know them records by heart. I just look at the styles.
I think Billy Joe Saunders has the better names on his record. Eubank Jr.
That was like 10 years ago.
Doesn't matter. It's still a win, isn't it? Eubank Jr.
Eubank Jr. is another hype
Who's
job.
the guy from Canada that he schooled? What's his name again? The guy from Canada. My mind's gone completely blank. Beat the guy from Canada. You know, but again, I just find it. I just find it kind of embarrassing that he's questioning Canelo's record. David Lemieux, that's it. You know that.
Yeah, but Lemieux was never punch bag.
But he still beat him though, innit, in his own backyard. But look, forget about that. We talk about records all day long. Your thoughts on Andrade questioning Canelo's choice of opponents, and can Andrade trouble the likes of a Canelo or a Golovkin at this stage in his career?
I think he's got more of a chance against Golovkin based on Golovkin's style, come forward style, and Andrade can potentially become the counter puncher and do well. Although Golovkin's a massive puncher, and he's not flat footed. He cuts the ring off well. I don't know how much Golovkin's got left in his tank now. Obviously, in his prime, he would have battered Andrade, but he's not in his prime no more. I'm not going to talk about Andrade with Canelo because Canelo has nothing to prove, and we all know the outcome of that fight, what that would be. But
so you think Canelo would beat Andrade?
Yeah, of course I would.
Convincingly?
I don't think he beat him convincingly. Andrade will have his moments because he's a good boxer, but I think Canelo will eventually suss him out and possibly stop him late.
Well, either way, listen, it's another guy who's yet to have a career-defining fight, and he's, 31, 32 years old now?
Probably a bit older than that, yeah.
It's
It's frustrating because there's so many boxers out there without career-defining fights.
160 and 168. You know, there's even Munguia. I like that fight.
Yeah.
You know,
I think Munguia might be fighting. Who is he fighting?
He's just beaten Rosado.
Maybe he might be fighting Golovkin.
Well, look, either way, there is a handful of fights to be made, and you know, one of the names we mentioned is Chris Eubank Jr. He takes on the guy that Andrade beat earlier on in the year, Liam Williams, December the 11th at the Motorpoint Arena in Cardiff. Obviously, at the moment, that fight's kind of up in limbo because there's rumours circulating around the boxing world that the fight is off due to an injury that Liam Williams has picked up. Spoke to Adam Smith last night and he goes, it's all just rumours at the moment. Nothing's been confirmed. As far as he's concerned, it's all systems go for December the 11th. You can check out that interview on our channel. You can check out other interviews as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. But we just have to go with what we know. The fight is still on. We haven't heard anything from Eubank. We haven't heard anything from Williams. So we're just going to go with what we know. The fight's still on. Do you like the fight?
I do like the fight. I think it's a good domestic fight. I think Eubank will beat Williams up badly. I think Williams' style is tailor-made for Eubank. Eubank throws lots of combinations, power punches, and Williams a come forward fighter, and he's just gonna walk into big shots, and his face is gonna get busted up, and the corner will throw in the towel.
You can really see Dominic Ingle throwing in the towel.
I can vision the fight right now as we speak. I think Williams is gonna have his face busted in.
Can I just give you my point of what I think of the fight? I think it's a very good fight. I think it's a good way to end the year as well. I think it's obviously Sky Sports and Boxer need to put on big fights. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of it. But I just think the fact that Chris Eubank Jr. is still fighting at British level at this stage of his career just tells you everything that's wrong with him. Now,
that's why I said he's a hype job.
No disrespect to Liam Williams. I really like Liam Williams. I thought he put up a half-decent performance against Andrade. And, you know, he's got the heart of a lion and he will fight anybody. He's chased this fight for years. But when you are the son of Chris Eubank Sr. and you come on into the boxing world and you've got so much hype around you and your old man said that, oh, this kid's going to be the next Floyd Mayweather, this kid's going to do this kid's going to do that, and you're fighting at British level at, 31, 32 years old, that for me just tells me everything we need to know about how Chris Eubank Jr.'s career has been handled. Now, I'm not saying it's entirely his fault. I do think he's wasted a number of good years in his career, and I do think he's not lived up to his full potential, and I think Eubank Jr. is a very exciting fighter to watch, and I think with the right tools, and if he sticks with Roy Jones Jr. throughout the duration of the rest of his career, and he picks up on what Roy Jones is trying to teach him, he can easily become a much better fighter. But the way his career has been handled, 31, 32 years old, he's fought James Agale, he's fought George Groves, he's fought Bill Joe Saunders. He's still having these British domestic fights at this age.
He flopped really badly. His biggest fight was against George Groves. I personally thought he would win, but he flopped. He got schooled by a Groves who was pretty much past his prime, as shown in his next fight where he got stopped by Callum Smith. He lost to Billy Joe Saunders. He beat a way past his prime James DeGale. That's just summarizes Chris Eubank's career.
From what you've, sorry to disturb you, HF, from what you've seen of him with Roy Jones Jr., I think it's three fights they've had. Sorry, it's 2 fights they've had. Have you been impressed? Have you seen anything different that makes you think he's capable of going on and winning a world title?
But who has he fought?
He's had a lot of time out the ring. It's just all about easing him in.
I think Eubank Jr. will be a good fighter, but he just doesn't have. Maybe he does have, but he doesn't know how to use the jab. He's got good fundamentals behind him, but if he jabbed more, I'm a big fan of the jab. If he jabbed more, he'd become a good fighter. But he doesn't seem to use it. He just wants to go in there and blast you away, and that doesn't always happen. Not against elite level fighters anyway. And that's how George Groves pretty much beat him with one hand.
Well, either way, listen, I agree with you on that. But I do like Eubank Jr. I think he's exciting, but I just think that it's the case of slowly it's becoming.
He's a big ticket settler. He's big name because of his name. He's exciting. He's a trash talker, but he doesn't show anything in the ring where it matters the most.
Let's talk this fight with Liam Williams. We know it's not going to go the distance. Liam Williams is a come-forward fighter, so is Chris Eubank. I think with basing boxing IQ, I think Chris Eubank can beat Liam Williams. I don't think he needs to, have the same approach as he did with George Groves. But I do think that Liam Williams might sense vulnerability in Eubank here, because Eubank Jr., we've seen in the past when he's gone into fights and he's left himself open, i.e. the George Groves fight, he's been hurt. You've seen the state of him after the fight against George Groves, even though Eubank almost stopped it right at the end. I'm not ruling out Liam Williams here. I do have Eubank as my favourite, but how do you see this fight panning out?
I think Liam Williams got a lot of heart, but I do also think Eubank's got a really good chin, and Liam Williams doesn't punch hard enough to trouble Eubank Jr. Eubank's just gonna throw fast combinations into a coming in Williams, and he probably stop him on cuts or something.
Well, look, fingers crossed that the fight's not off, because I definitely fancy a few days in Cardiff. Me and you had a great day out a few years ago with the boys going to watch Anthony Joshua take on Carlos Takam in the Principality Stadium. The Welsh fans, the Welsh Dragon, they like to come out in their numbers. And
we did meet the FF too, didn't we?
We sure did meet the FF.
Yeah, we did get kicked out.
Well, we didn't get kicked out. That's the main thing.
I did put hot dog in Shane's drink.
You did, mate. I was there. But look, hopefully we get to go to Cardiff and watch this fight because it's a fight that I'm looking forward to. I could definitely do with a couple of days break. We'll talk a bit about what went down at the WBC Convention the other day. It's just really, really blown up what went down at that convention. We start off with what went down with the heavyweights. We all expected the WBC to order the fight between Tyson Fury to defend his title against the body snatcher Dillian Whyte. In the end, the fight was not ordered due to an ongoing arbitration case. The word that seems to be appearing a lot in boxing these days, especially when it comes to the heavyweight division. I have to say I was disgusted by that. I know you're going to have your say. Give me a second. I have to say I was disgusted by that because let's be honest with each other. You got Joshua Usyk rematch is going to happen. Who else out there is the ideal opponent? You've got to say it has to be Dillian Whyte. Some fans have been saying on Twitter he deserves it because of supposedly picked up an injury before the Otto Wallin fight, and some fans are saying he tried outpricing himself when he got offered the fight with Joshua, the rematch in New York. I'm going to disagree with that because this guy has beaten Rivas, Lucas Brown, Chisora twice, Joseph Parker. You know, he put it right against Alexander Povetkin. What the WBC are doing to this guy is an absolute disgrace. It's disgusting. It's a disgrace to boxing. For me, the WBC is one of the most respected governing bodies in boxing. I've got it down as the most famous governing body in boxing, but what they're doing to Dillian Whyte right now is below the belt. I feel bad for Dillian Whyte, and it just makes me think, right, you've got an arbitration going on with Dillian Whyte for whatever reason. There's no need. That doesn't mean we have to stop the fight. Let the fight go ahead. Order the fight. Tyson Fury's come out yesterday and said in interviews he wants to be fighting in February or latest end of March. I am appalled by the WBC's decision on this, HF.
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I think had there not been an arbitration in place, the fight would have been ordered. So that's all they're waiting for right now. They're just waiting for a final decision. Once that gets cleared up, then they will eventually call Dillian Whyte to be summoned and presented as a mandatory challenger to Fury.
But if you look at the arbitration case between Fury and Wilder, that went on for a very long time.
I don't know what that was over. I don't really know what this one's over.
We can't expect... I don't see Tyson Fury wanting to wait around. I watched his interview with IFL TV last night. Shout out to IFL TV. And he goes, he's not waiting around. He goes, he will fight come February, March. There's rumours of a potential fight with Joe Joyce. Listen, you have had your opinion on Dillian Whyte. Oh, he tried to get more out of the potential rematch with Joshua in New York. Let's get real, HF. This guy has beaten all the top heavyweights, apart from the top 3 or 4, whether you include Wilder in that. There's something's got to give for Dillian Whyte. You can't say this is right what they're doing. What they're doing is criminal. I'm appalled. I'm disgusted. It upsets me to see a fighter like Dillian Whyte. Regardless of what your opinion of Dillian Whyte is, he's fought everybody. He has never once shied away from a challenge. And he's still not been given his shot that he deserves. How many more years is he going to be the number one mandatory with the WBC?
Yeah, but the thing is with that is you've got rematch clauses, haven't you? You've got Wilder and Fury. Wilder's had the WBC belt for a number of years now. Fury has. No, Wilder had it first, didn't he?
Oh, yes.
And he fought Fury. Then they had a rematch clause, and then he won the arbitration and ended up having a third fight. That's pretty much what's prolonged Dillian Whyte's opportunity. In the meantime, he was presented a fight against Joshua, which he turned down for his own reasons, whatever they might be. Obviously, lack of funds that were presented to him. It is unfortunate, but I can see why it's taken so long for him to be given this opportunity. But it will happen. It will happen soon.
When? When's it gonna happen? 10 years,
I don't know when it happened, but I think next year he'll fight Fury because obviously AJ's got unfinished business. That's a big fight in itself. I don't know whether AJ can beat Usyk based on his last performance. Maybe if he changes his game plan, which I'm sure he's working on right now, he can just out-muscle and outsize Usyk, which I'm hoping he does. Well, I think Fury will take care of business with Whyte. And then we get the big fight. But it's not a big fight anymore because, let's be honest, man, I don't see anyone beating Fury. Definitely not AJ. I think Wilder had the best chance just based on his punching power. He tried. He landed some punches, knocked Fury down. But Fury's just fucking unstoppable right now, isn't he?
And I 100% agree with you, and I've been saying it since Dusseldorf. He's the best heavyweight in the world. And you're like, no, he's only beating one guy and this and that. You know, it had to take 3 victories against Deontay Wilder for you to agree with that. But I'm glad you're on that hype train right now, and I'm glad you finally come to your senses. But that's a discussion for another day. Obviously, Bob Arum done an interview as well, and he said he likes the idea of making Tyson Fury versus Joe Joyce. I think it's a half decent fight. Do I think it sells out a Wembley or or an Old Trafford, which we know Tyson Fury wants to fight in the UK next? I don't think it does. I think it definitely fills out the MEN, maybe even the O2. Would that really excite the British public?
No, Joe Joyce. Yeah, he had a good win against Dubois.
Joe Joyce is a good fighter.
He's a good fighter, but he's just way too slow. He's way too slow. He had a good win, but that's all there is to it. He doesn't really excel in any further levels beyond that. I don't see him ever winning a world title.
He's older though. He's got a great amateur background. You know,
he's fresh. He's fresh,
he's beaten
but
some good fighters at heavyweight. Do you not think
the only way
any threat?
No, he doesn't, because the guys who are holding the titles are just at a different level. You got AJ. Joyce doesn't beat AJ. Joyce doesn't beat Usyk. Joyce doesn't beat Fury. Joyce doesn't beat Dillian Whyte. Joyce don't beat Wilder. It's just a good domestic fight, just to keep the Fury in the ring. That's it, really.
So let's say, for example, you know, we don't get Fury versus Whyte. We're definitely not going to get Fury versus the winner of Usyk and Joshua. Maybe perhaps at the end of 2022 or even going into the following year. Let's say you had to pick the opponent, right? You had to pick Tyson Fury's next opponent out of that bunch of heavyweights that you could potentially pick. Who would you put him in with? If it's not Joe Joyce or Dillian Whyte, because there's a chance it might not even be Joe Joyce as well.
Well, there's not many left. There's Andy Ruiz lurking around, but I don't see that fight happening anytime soon. I don't think it will happen at all. Andy Ruiz has got a lot of making up to do after his shit performance last time round against Joshua. He beat Ariola, but he got dropped as well.
Yeah, it wasn't a convincing.
They're kind of running out of opponents now. I think Fury can fight AJ several times over. I think AJ is still to fight Wilder. He can fight him several times over. That's still a big fight. AJ and Dillian Whyte will always be a big fight. Mm-hmm. So these guys can kind of fight each other several times over and give us fans big fights for the next couple of years. But besides them top 3 or 4 guys, there's not any other guys out there who could trouble the big boys.
You mentioned Andy Ruiz fight, and I was actually, before obviously we started filming the podcast, I was actually thinking to myself, who is an ideal opponent? And I actually thought of Andy Ruiz as well. And
I'd like to see Ruiz versus Whyte.
Well, Ruiz versus Whyte, yeah, another good fight. There's obviously rumours going around that Charles Martin is going to fight Luis Ortiz. You know, that's not a bad fight, you know. But would I want to see them two fight Tyson Fury? Probably not. I don't think Daniel Dubois is ready. I think he's got a little bit more rebuilding to do. You know, there's Joseph Parker, Derek Chisora fight in a rematch. I don't think they'll give Tyson Fury a challenge. We've all seen
Rahman.
I would have loved to have seen Muhammad Ali versus Tyson Fury, but obviously
I want to see Muhammad Ali versus Rahman.
Anyway, listen, enough of Rahman. Did I? So we talk about the next opponent. You know, you've got to look at the top 2 candidates are going to be Dillian Whyte, Joe Joyce. But if you had to think outside the box, I'd probably go for Andy Ruiz. You know, Tyson Fury is always, I don't know why, but he's always spoken about a third fight with his old pal Derek Chisora, as he likes to say. Yeah. I don't want to see a third fight between them two.
I don't want to see Derek Chisora in the ring ever again.
All right, HF, come on. Let's go a bit easy. Give Del Boy a bit of credit, mate. And then obviously you got Joseph.
Derek Chisora is just basically known as the guy who loses all of his big fights.
HF. Yeah, he loses big fights.
He loses all of his fights. Yeah, he's still on pay-per-view.
Did Derek Chisora not put up a better performance against Usyk than Joshua did?
Yeah, because he actually come to fight. AJ didn't come to fight. AJ was gun shy. He's lost that fear. He's got too much fear in him now. He doesn't want to punch. throw punches
All
because
right,
he's scared
okay.
of
So
getting countered.
are we right to agree that if it's not Whyte and it's not Joe Joyce, we wouldn't mind seeing an Andy Ruiz fight? Because listen,
With who?
With Tyson Fury.
Yeah, but it'd be a bit weird because Ruiz is like 5'2" and Tyson is
Look
like
at how
7'1".
tall Joshua was and what Ruiz done to him in the first fight. Don't look at size. Don't look at power. Don't look at records. It is heavyweight boxing, baby.
Yeah, it's like
One
two fatties in the ring. You might as well throw me in the ring too. Have a triple threat match.
I think if we threw you in the ring, we need half the crowd attendance just to get your fat ass in the ring. Anyway, look. We'll move on. Talk about a couple of more things. Sky Sports Boxer show last night. Richard Riakphore won his fight against Girodola. Richard Riakphore's been talking a lot about Canelo Alvarez. Obviously, we know one of the other things is Canelo Alvarez, the WBC have ordered the fight with Ilunga Makabu. Before we talk a bit about the Sky Sports show, thoughts on Canelo going out to Cruiserweight?
Yeah, I think he's just there to make history, similar to what Roy Jones did. He went up
Roy Jones didn't win a Cruiserweight title, though, did he? He won the German Cruiserweight title, he never won the world
I don't think he did, yeah. He went into heavyweight, he fought John Ruiz, he won a title, come back down, and that's where it all went wrong for him.
I'm going to ask you one question, and I'm sorry to disturb you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say Canelo wins the world title at Cruiserweight, he unifies against either Abradis or Lawrence Okoli or whoever's got another.
No, that's not his intention.
But I'm just saying, all right, let's say he doesn't then. Let's say he wins the world title at Cruiserweight and he stops Makabu convincingly. Do you rule out the possibility of him going up to heavyweight?
Yeah, because he's not going to win the world title, not against Fury or AJ. That's ridiculous. You got to remember, this guy started his career at 147. Mm-hmm. He's only going to Cruiserweight.
Do you think people
to
said
pick up
the
a
exact
belt.
same about Roy Jones Jr.?
Yeah, Roy Jones started at 160. That's like 2 divisions higher anyway.
What's the difference between cruiser? It's what, 205?
Two divisions.
Cruiserweight and heavyweight. It's 205 and 250.
Yeah, but he picked out John Ruiz because of the fact that he can beat a John Ruiz, which is the same reason why Canelo is choosing Makabu, because he's probably the weakest of the bunch. Like I said, he just wants to create history and become a title holder. There's nothing more to it.
Makabu gets payday.
No, fuck Makabu's payday. But that's all it is. True. Canelo will pick up a belt, come back down again. But the problem is it a good move to move back down again? That's the problem.
You're looking forward to seeing
because as we saw with Roy Jones, when he moved back down, he ended up getting knocked out by Tarver because there's just too much for his body to take.
You're looking forward to seeing him at Cruiserweight against Makabu?
I personally don't want to see him at Cruiserweight. I don't see there's any point. Well, there is a point, but there's bigger fights out there. I want to see him fight Benavidez and Jamal Charlo, and there was another name.
I'm not jumping on the Benavidez bandwagon with you. I just think, if you talk about Caleb Plant and you say
Golovkin.
Yeah, go for third fight with Triple G. I'd like to see the fight with Munguia. But I'm sorry, HF, I can't agree with you on the whole Benavidez fight. But how does this fight plan out for you? Because it was apparently rumoured to be set for May.
Well, I'm not seeing much of Makabu besides the Teddy Belly fight. Yeah, obviously, I think he hurt or dropped. He hurt, didn't he, in the first 1-2 rounds? Belly's a big puncher. He's a bigger guy than Canelo. And he's got a massive left hook, and he landed that against Makabu, and he won the title. That was a long while ago now. I think 2014 or 15. Since then, Makabu's aged by 6-7 years. So maybe that's another thing that Canelo sees. Mm-hmm. So hats off to him if he wins. But it's just picking up a piece of a title.
And it's becoming another world champion at another weight. And I think he'll walk through Makabu, but listen, it's boxing, you never know what could happen. Sky Sports Boxer show last night. Richard Riakphore won his fight against former world title challenger Girodola. He looked very well in doing it. He was very convincing as well. A very good performance. Can Riakphore get onto that world stage now with the likes of the Bradises and the Okolis and maybe even the Makabus and the Canelos?
Well, I wouldn't put Canelo in there yet because I don't see him as a cruiserweight. I don't see him as a cruiserweight. Him versus Okoli, obviously, it can be a big British fight. Okoli, you might say he's got bigger fish to fry. I think he probably wants to move up to heavyweight as well, eventually. The cruiserweight division has never really excited me. I don't really pay too much attention to it. So, you not asking me about cruiserweights is an option.
I like Richard Riakphore. I think he's definitely going to pick up a world title at some point, and I wouldn't rule him out going up to heavyweight. But the bottom line is, it's a
Dud name though.
Dud name doesn't matter if it's a dud name or not. He's a very good fighter, a very skillful fighter. He had a number of years at the ring, and he's got a good story behind him. So
what's this shit around here anyway?
it'd be very interesting.
Dan Azeez.
Dan Azeez last night winning the British light heavyweight title against Jose Burton. The killer Dan Azeez, big Dan Azeez, a very interesting fighter.
Dan Azeez, do you know what? I've never actually heard of him before this fight, but I saw the fight against Burton, and he did well. He did absolutely batter him on the ropes.
It was a destructive performance from Dan Azeez last night, and I had done an interview with Dan a few weeks ago, and you could tell that the guy was looking to put on a show, and I believe he won every second of that fight. He was just in control from the first minute to the last. I kind of just saw after the first minute of that fight, because I was there live last night, I knew what was going to happen. Feel sorry for Jose Burton. I thought he put up a, he put up a...
He's seen better days.
He's seen better days, but Dan Azeez was just completely on another level last night. What I like about this is just another name added to...
I want to see Dan Azeez against Yard on these
Dan
guys.
Azeez, Anthony Yard, Lyndon Arthur...
When are they fighting? When's it Arthur?
That's next weekend, December the 4th. But from what you see...
And who else is fighting that night?
You got Hamza
I think
Shiraz
you got Devin Haney, haven't you?
Devin Haney's going to fight. Devin Haney fighting? No, you mean TFM?
No, TFM fighting on 27th. I think the following week on DAZN you got Devin Haney.
But either way, HF, let's just stick on. Yeah. Let's just stick to this. Dan Azeez, as I just mentioned, Yard, Boatsi, Lyndon Arthur, Callum Smith. Is he ready for those fights?
I don't think he's ready for Boatsi. Boatsi is going to take off his career. He's going to become the leader of the division.
Ahead of Callum Smith. Callum
Smith is a good fighter. That's a good fight, actually. How old is Callum Smith?
I think it's early 30s.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Callum Smith's a good fighter.
Because the difference between those fighters is Callum Smith managed to win a world title at a lower division, so he's got that extra experience. He's won the Muhammad Ali trophy as well. He's been in big fights.
I did rate Yard at one point, but I realised once he lost to Kovalev that if you can't beat an old Kovalev, then you're not really the big hype that you are. That you're being portrayed as to be, because obviously the following fight Kovalev did lose badly to Canelo, so it kind of shows you what level Yard's at.
I don't think he lost badly to Canelo. I just think Canelo just waited patiently for the right time and just...
Canelo, as soon as he stepped up a gear, he took Kovalev out.
But Dan Azeez, this kid Dan Azeez...
He's a good British level fighter. He won't win anything at the world title level, and he knows that himself, which is why he's asking for all the good British guys to mix it up with him. Because I'm sure he understands that he won't.
He's 31 years old as well.
Yeah, he's 32. Yeah.
But
he's got a good style to him. He'll sell tickets. He speaks well. He looks the part. I want to see him fight maybe the loser of Yard versus Lyndon Arthur.
Potentially might not be no way back for the loser of Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yard, but we'll have to see. It's an exciting division. Is a light heavyweight domestic wise. It's a big year for boxing next year. And I just. Fingers crossed that we do.
I think if I get into shape and with the right training behind me and the right nutritional coach and conditioner
and a gastric band as well,
and a few miracles, and a few slips, ducks and dives, I think I could be. I think one of these guys.
Every takeaway in Bedfordshire got closed down for 6 months, you might actually have a chance.
There's always a chance.
I've seen you spar with Shane in the. In his the Ali Boxing Club, Gulva Club it is as well.
I was out of shape that day.
But yeah, you've got a finger too about you, HF. You know, maybe I could promote you and we could take you to that next level, i.e. the Southern Area level, and then just call it a daily.
I would much rather prefer Southern Fried these days.
Once a foodie, always a foodie. All right, listen, that's all we've got time for on podcast 43 HF Entertaining.
Let me just showcase some of my skills for all the non-believers. Look at that. Yeah.
All the non-believers, you watch too much bloody 4 lines in your day. But HF, listen, a pleasure as always.
I've got dynamite here either.
You know, HF, you actually look a bit like Cash Ali with that hat on. Do you know that?
Nah, FF.
Anyway, listen, HF, pleasure as always. Thank you very much for jumping on our 43rd podcast of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. And guys out there, Please remember, if you haven't already, to hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment for all the latest Lights Out Boxing podcast content. Check us out on all our social media platforms, and let us know what you thought of today's podcast in the comment section below. I'm Faisal Khan. He's Usman Mahmood.
Sponsored by Lucas.
Sponsored and proudly sponsored by the one and only Spartans Law. Massive shout out to our sponsors.
We are Spartans.
Hoo, hoo, hoo. Thank you very much for listening to podcast 43 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.